More Like Home by Like to Laugh on AO3, Chapter 22. They sat down at the back of the theater, and Danny drummed his fingers nervously on his thigh, uncertainty dancing around his expression. Bruce set a hand over his to calm him, and Danny forced himself to relax, leaning back. Bruce reminded himself to relax also. Matches Malone was on a casual outing with his nephew. Like most horror movies, this one was slow to start. It was well rated, which was promising for Danny, but Bruce didn't bother paying attention. He kept half his attention on Danny, the other on the mood of the room. Tentatively, Danny flashed a signal. No movement yet. Bruce almost smiled, instead just nodded. On screen, the tension started to build, moving from everyday to ominous. Danny closed his eyes, but his brow quickly furrowed, and he shook his head with visible disappointment. Bruce glanced at the audience. Of course, these were all horror movie fans. The tense atmosphere was building. Anticipation more than fear. What little Danny had sensed was probably from the less avid horror fan, there for the story. Bruce ran through contingency plans in his head. He was already planning to encourage Danny to eat during patrol. Santana had assured him it did not harm. And Batman was a figure meant to invoke fear, something he chose to view as fortuitous. However, working with Jason might have proven more fruitful, since Jason tended to spend more time intentionally terrorizing his targets. Was this why? Did Jason feed from them subconsciously? Regardless, allowing Danny to join surreptitiously before his training was complete would both allow him to feed himself and give him some time to observe them in action before he joined them officially. But he was getting ahead of himself. The first jump scare struck. Half the audience gasped, while the other few yelped loudly. And Danny's breath hitched. He leaned forward, his eyes still closed, chasing whatever he was feeling, and Bruce reached forward to set a hand on his shoulder. "Slowly," he murmured, thinking of Jason in his earliest days at the manor. "Slowly." Danny frowned, but leaned back, visibly trying to relax. On screen, the mood eased back down to anticipation, and Danny's breath hitched again. This time, in frustration, he shifted his weight until he was poised to lunge, on the edge of his seat with one foot back. It betrayed how hungry he really was, as if his food was being dangled in front of him, just out of reach. Bruce squeezed, both a reassurance and a warning. "More than half the movie is left," he murmured, keeping his voice low. "You'll get your fill. If you're still hungry, we'll stay for another." Danny relaxed slightly and nodded without opening his eyes, all of his attention focused on his ability to sense fear. Then the next jump scare came, and Bruce flinched, feeling for a moment as if the monster had leapt from the screen to reality. Not as unreasonable as he should like, fortunately. It took him a moment to understand why the feeling of fear stretched on so unnaturally long, and then he looked down and realized that the monster was Danny, starved and desperate. He shifted his hands from Danny's shoulder down to his forearm and gripped him tightly. "Be patient," he said, carefully modulating his tone. Danny blinked his eyes open, glancing up at him with irritation. A moment later, realization flickered across his face, and he ducked his head. The sense of being hunted disappeared, and Bruce took a breath. "Sorry," Danny whispered.
I know.
Kaz had explained the growing signs of a strange hunger. Danny's shortened attention span and unfocused eyes, and the subtle loss of coordination. She'd been the first to realize Danny wasn't getting enough ectoplasm.
This movie is being shown until past midnight. We can stay here all day.
Danny exhaled and nodded, visibly trying to relax himself again. After a minute, he scooted over to push hesitantly on Bruce's arm. It took Bruce a moment to realize what he wanted. Then he lifted his arm. Danny ducked under it, leaning on Bruce to seek comfort as he waited for more food. Bruce settled his arm around Danny's shoulders. The rest of the movie passed without incident. After a while, Bruce was able to identify the feeling of Danny reaching out, a faint pulse of power from the child beside him, a subtle, draining feeling, the sense of something being taken. As long as Danny was careful, it blended with the rhythm of the movie, enhancing the feeling of fear without standing out. Though Bruce suspected some strange reviews might be coming out of Gotham soon. "Can we stay for another?" Danny asked, almost as soon as the movie was over. There was a faint hum of power from him that Bruce hadn't even realized had been absent. But his pleading look made it clear that he was still feeling some hunger. Bruce nodded instantly.
"But we'll have to buy another ticket,"
he said, nudging Danny to his feet.
"Come on."
It only took a few minutes, though they'd have to wait longer for the movie to start. More than 20 minutes before the trailers would begin. Unfortunately, the only other showing at the moment was almost 3/4 over, so a wait it was. Bruce got some more popcorn in the meantime, hoping it would keep Danny occupied until then. Fortunately, his difficulty swallowing only had lasted a few days.
"Feeling better?"
he asked in a low voice, weary of the near-empty theater. Danny nodded, considerably less fidgety than he had been at the start of the first. "I didn't even realize I was hungry," he admitted, with a faint grimace of obvious embarrassment, still ashamed of his confusing biology. Bruce nodded. "I just thought I was, homesick or something." "Ah, yes. That would have explained the short attention span and preoccupation, though not the loss of coordination nor any feelings of hunger."
"Get into the habit of checking,"
he instructed quietly.
"If you have the habit of constantly feeling your body signals, it'll be easier to notice automatically if they are abnormal."
Danny nodded. Danny settled back into his place against Bruce's side and munched on popcorn, becoming more fidgety and impatient as time rolled on, and people began to trickle in. As Bruce had hoped, he distracted himself with the snack instead of becoming stressed, and answered the text from Dick to reassure him that it was working fine. Then sent one to Jason asking if he ate fear. The answer was, "I don't fucking know. Ask me when we can talk in person." Bruce hoped Jason's lessons on ghosthood were going well. He put his phone away when the movie started, but watched it with bored eyes instead of closing them and tuning it out. Bruce watched as well, having gathered most of the data he needed from the first round. This time, when the jump scare started, Danny closed his eyes and just breathed in, rather than silently chasing the feeling of fear. A faint sense of draining returned, but without any urgency. Close to the end of the movie, the feeling cut off entirely. Danny sighed in clear pleasure, settling heavier against Bruce's side. The very picture of full and sleepy. Bruce allowed himself a slightly satisfied smile. A part of him was tempted to carry Danny
out of the theater rather than disturbing him, but unfortunately that behavior would be odd enough for people to take note. He woke Danny up and guided him out with a hand on his back while Danny yawned. Having his portal for a decade longer than Danny's parents, Vlad did almost everything differently, and it took Danny a while to find everything he needed. Eventually, though, he figured out a large storage tank that Vlad had constantly extracted ectoplasm and started filling up bottles. Tim glanced at the 2 industrial-sized centrifuges Vlad had set up. "Should I order one of these for the lab?" he asked. Danny hummed, running calculations in his head. The Batcave lab had a couple of centrifuges, but they were more normal-sized ones for individual testing rather than research or production. He sighed at the realization. "Yeah," he admitted reluctantly. "Ectoplasm has to centrifuge at 7,500 RPM for 10 minutes to completely separate it, and getting a full week's supply out of the ones we have would take a while, and it's probably contaminate the machines." His parents had 3 1-liter centrifuges for the purpose, and it took them a full day to get as much as they used in a week. "The yield is 40 milliliters, right?" Tim asked. "Yeah, painful, right?" Danny shot him a rueful smile, getting up to load the centrifuge. "A little. What the hell is the rest?" "I'm not sure my parents ever isolated all of it. Vlad probably has more data." Danny shrugged. "The concentrated liquid energy, ecto-energy, which is what makes good for weapons production. The rest of the mixture is cyconic plasm and thought-form particulates. Interesting stuff, but not nearly as predictable, though their most innovative creations tended to use it, like the ectoskeleton and the Maddie modulator." "And which part of this stuff did your parents spoon feed you?" Danny looked over his shoulder to make a face at Tim. "None of it, thanks," he said irritably, setting the centrifuge to run, then reluctantly. "The ecto-energy infects food, and as long as it was below a certain level, they figured it was safe to eat. And I thought my parents were neglectful," Tim muttered, rifling through Vlad's cabinets to catalog things. Danny stiffened. "My parents weren't neglectful," he said, clipped and terse. "Certainly weren't anything like Tim's parents, who would leave him alone for weeks and months at a time. Maybe the things they did to ghosts made them supervillains, but they were good parents." Tim paused, visibly deciding on how much to push back on this, then sighed and continued documenting evidence. "Your parents poisoned you," Tim said bluntly. Danny opened his mouth. "You can make the argument that it was accidental, but they did absolutely poison you." Danny clenched his jaw. "They also gave you free, unsupervised access to radioactive materials, high-voltage equipment, and firearms. Yes, energy weapons have been legally considered firearms for almost 5 years." Danny shut his mouth again. "That home was unsafe before you became a ghost, which you should know because you died in it." An involuntary growl ripped itself out of Danny's chest at that. He slammed his hands on the counter and snarled at Tim. "You don't talk about that." Tim paused, then nodded, and Danny gave a minute to take a deep breath and calm down. A glow faded back out of his eyes. Danny straightened out the tray of vials he accidentally knocked into, scowling when he realized he'd broken some of them. "Your parents didn't protect you, and that's a type of neglect." Tim said after a while, making Danny stiffen again. Tim shifted to keep Danny in his sight. Danny gave up, pretending anything was normal, and leaned on the counter, burying his face in his hands. And sure, that's different from what my parents did. Stiffness crept into Tim's clinical tone. But they're supposed to keep you safe. You know that, right? Danny wanted to argue that they tried. It would be a lie. My parents loved me too, Tim said. There was a tone of finality that kept Danny from responding, and silence fell over the lab. After a minute, Danny went to pick out the broken vials and replace them with new ones. The centrifuge stopped. He opened it up, grabbed the first bottle, and started siphoning out the concentrate. Don't you need to be a police officer to collect evidence? Danny asked at last, graciously changing the subject. There are a lot of procedural and chain of custody rules, right? We can't collect the evidence for the police, but we can give them an itemized list of what to look for, Tim explained, allowing it without protest. And it counts as suspicious if they can't find something we told them to look for. And League-certified heroes count as law enforcement officials for the purpose of crime scene contamination as long as we submit an official report on what happened. B will make sure you know all the procedural rules before he set you on any official investigations. Danny managed to smile. That resolved some of his worries about getting involved with human stuff. B really has this hammered out, doesn't he? The Justice League has been working on it for nearly 2 decades now, Tim pointed out, closing the cabinet he was looking through. Do you want to charge Masters for trying to clone you? It's legally considered a form of sexual assault, you know. Oh, more things Danny really didn't want to talk about. No, I think we've gotten enough charges piled up. The list of charges they settled on was really kind of ridiculous. 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping, 3 counts of aggravated assault, 1 count of child endangerment, 1 of stalking, 1 of blackmail, and 1 of extortion. How come Slade Wilson doesn't have a list of charges like this? Context, Tim explained. Believe me, B would have loved to, but Slade committed all those crimes against Robin, which means they can't be prosecuted without revealing Dick's identity. Master's mistake was committing crimes against his civilian identity against your civilian identity. What a weird thought. Danny shut the cooler and went to dump out the thick leftover plasm. Hey, he said after a minute, bringing down the jars to refill at the storage tank. Can I ask you a question? No judgment, good faith. Tim raised an eyebrow, but didn't turn away. Shoot. If you know how, creepy what happened is, why were you so mad at Superman? Tim tensed visibly, but to his credit, he didn't snap at Danny. He kept working for a minute, and Danny let it go, getting up to reload the centrifuge. He set it running, and then moved to the other to repeat the process. I can respect the position Clark was put in, Tim said at last, clipped now. And I don't think he's a bad person in general, but I'm Khan's friend, and Khan was crushed by how Clark reacted to him. I can acknowledge the situation and still be furious on Khan's behalf. Pause. They're close now, but Khan needed him then. Danny softened. That makes sense. Sorry. I didn't mean anything by it. How did you react at first? Danny smiled ruefully, straightening up with a third set of jars. When I first met Ellie, she told me she was my cousin, Danielle, he told Tim, leaning down to load the second centrifuge. Tim scoffed. Yeah, I didn't really believe it, but cloning honestly didn't even cross my mind. Anyway, I had a few hours to get to know her before I found out where she came from. He paused to gather his thoughts, leaning on the edge of the centrifuge. Finding out what Vlad was doing, that he had been making and melting clones of me for months. It was worse than finding that first camera in my bedroom. Being tortured was practically a relief by comparison. Till then, it hadn't even occurred to him that Vlad was capable of something like that. That he would make a blank copy of Danny and throw him away like a used tissue, as if he was a doll to play with. And Danny still had nightmares about the ways Vlad could have gotten his DNA and about the clones themselves. Actually, this was making him feel sick again. Belatedly, he set the second centrifuge to run and turned away, looking at the closed portal. But you weren't mad at Ellie. Tim's tone had softened in defense to Danny's changing mood. But his worry was clear, whether for Con or out of sympathy to Ellie. Danny smiled sardonically. How could I be? He asked. She was dying. Vlad made it clear that he'd kill her to finish his perfect clone, if it might help. And he wasn't even going to feel bad about it. Everything she was doing was because she thought he loved her. And she wanted him to be proud of her. I just felt really bad for her. So you're saying Clark should have been the one to rescue Con from Cadmus? Tim said dryly. Danny managed a smile. Honestly, it probably wouldn't have hurt. Clark seems like the sort of person who would have been softened by that. Good to know. Tim sounded resigned. Then unexpectedly, Con's been asking about you. Everyone in our orbit knows what Bruce getting a new kid means. Danny snorted, and Tim smirked back. I was thinking he could come over and you could talk TK and ridiculous number of powers. You might not have Kryptonian-based enhancements, but it'd be interesting to see you spar. Danny couldn't stop a smile as he thought, sure, sounds like fun. He almost certainly lose, depending on how his own powers interacted with Kryptonian physiology, but he'd have to be an idiot to pass up a chance to spar against Superboy. Tim smiled back at him, then turned away. Just so you know, according to Master's records, the clones were made from blood and ectoplasm samples he hired Skulker to collect. He didn't use anything else. The relief nearly bellowed over Danny, and he let out a shaky laugh. You know, I think I'll have a word with Skulker about that. And don't forget to go through the blueprints. Bruce asked you to pick out anything that we wouldn't want publicly available, remember? Oh, right. You have a space obsession. Startled, Danny blinked the stars out of his eyes and looked up at where Bruce was climbing the last few steps into the observatory. Oh, hi, Bruce. He rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, I do. I didn't realize until last period. It's nice, though. It feels nice. He wondered if this was what other ghosts felt like with their obsession. It's good that we had this then. Unexpectedly, Bruce sat beside Danny and tipped his head back to look out the opening ceiling. Do you like it? Danny hummed in confirmation, reaching up to rub the telescope fondly. Yeah, it's good. The telescope was a little dated, and he wished he could spawn a power to maybe do something about all the smog, but he felt so at home in the observatory that he rarely felt the need to fly above the clouds to see the stars better. What's up? Did you need to talk to me? Bruce didn't answer for a moment. My mother used to show me the stars on clear nights from here, he said abruptly. She'd wake me up in the middle of the night. We'd compare star charts to what we could see. For meteor showers, we would drive out of the city to see them, somewhere clear. This was nothing Danny hadn't already known. Alfred had told him about it, but it made him smile that Bruce was telling him. Yeah, do you remember any of it? All of it, Bruce said honestly, studying the sky. If he remembered it half as well as Danny, he could probably all but see the stars through the fog. Most of the dates were lost on me at that age. What are Perseids? They peak in August, Danny said instantly, hesitated, and then added, Jimmeads are in mid-December. That should be the next big shower. It's usually the best of the year, too. We'll have to make time to go see them. Danny beamed for a while. Both of them sat in silence, and Danny traced the constellations that he could only half see. Only a very brightest stars broke through the smog, but it was enough to orientate him. He felt content with this. There's something I've been meaning to speak with you about. Bruce's tone turned more serious, and Danny glanced at him with worry, wondering what was serious enough that Bruce had felt a need to lead with something else. I'd like you to speak with a therapist about your ongoing mental health issues. I'd really rather not, Danny said hesitantly, thinking of Spectra. Bruce paused, considering that for a moment, and Danny focused harder on the sky. Can you tell me why not? Danny hesitated, wondering briefly if Bruce would think it was silly. Then he explained away. There was this ghost, he said, almost smiled when Bruce audibly pressed a sigh. And early in my career, Penelope Spectra, she posed as a counselor at my school. He considered ending it there, but he ended up elaborating. This was early, B. My sister didn't know about my secret yet, but she noticed something was wrong. I wasn't sleeping. I was more withdrawn and jumpy, and I was skipping classes for the first time, so she signed me up for counseling. He fell silent. It was oddly soft, and Danny understood it was a prompt to continue. Obviously, it sucked. Spectra feeds off depression and anxiety, so everyone that went to see her just came out worse, because she needled at them. That included me. He exhaled, not wanting to go over things Spectra had said. Some of them felt childish and stupid now. Most of them hit too close to home. And then she capped it all off with a plot to kill my sister. Not really eager to repeat my part in the experience. Bruce was quiet for a while, staring at the sky. May I be blunt with you, Danny? That wasn't promising, I guess. One way or another, this is necessary, he said frankly. Your anxiety is uncontrolled. Your feelings of alienation dominate many of your interactions. You exhibit several maladaptive behaviors stemming from previous domestic violence. On a practical level, these problems have already resulted in one serious medical event, as well as several crucial miscommunications. Leaving them untreated would be irresponsible, as it puts both you and your potential teammates at risk. Danny winced with each brisk point, and at the end he sighed. So, you're saying I don't have a choice? Not in as many words. However, I won't force you to see someone you're not comfortable with. I can vet them personally if you prefer. He paused, glancing at Danny. The one I have in mind is Black Canary. She's done at least a session or two with nearly every member of the Justice League, and all of them report positive experiences. For my part, while I've only seen her once, my relationship with my children substantially improved afterwards. I would consider seeing her again. At that, Danny admitted was a ringing endorsement, but it didn't make him feel any better. Freaky little boy with freaky little powers. I guess, if I have to. Bruce stared at him, not fooled by the concession. You could meet her beforehand and see how you get along, he offered, somewhat silted. Your skills with reflexive shielding have become satisfactory. I was planning on asking Black Canary to help refine your ghostly wail. You can decide after that. Danny wasn't convinced. And if I still don't want to? Bruce grunted. I suppose my second choice would be Harley Quinn. Danny blinked at him in surprise. Bruce shrugged with one shoulder, not as abashed in the least. She lost her professionalism necessary for formal practice, but she retains her skills as a therapist, and I don't believe that she would ever take advantage of a patient. She's never been emotionally sadistic. Danny's mouth twitched. Just physically sadistic. I'll think about it, Danny conceded, meaning in this time. Do you really think it's that important? Danny. Bruce sounded serious enough for Danny to look up, his voice tight with frustration and worry. If you were unable to tell me that you were starving, when will you ask for help? Oh, Danny had scared him. I'm sorry. I didn't want to tell you that I couldn't even feed myself properly. Bruce exhaled. That's what makes this necessary, he said. You need to be able to ask for help. Danny didn't really have a reply to that. He stared at the sky and traced constellations behind the clouds, and Bruce sat with him until the clouds thickened too much to see through.